Hey, what's up my friends? Aaron from Unison here, back with another video. This time today, I just wanted to go over some building blocks of synthesis and just kind of break it down and make it a bit more easier to understand and just kind of focus on the certain aspects of synthesis that I think are crucial to helping you to learn synthesis as a whole, to where you can start making any sound that you can think of in your mind and understanding how to sculpt it and form it and what particular waveforms you might want to use to go and make those sounds. So I'm going to be diving into a couple of different aspects of synthesis, like in terms of like waveforms and the different parameters of a synthesizer and things like that. So today we're going to be mainly focusing on Serum. I might be using maybe like Ableton's built-in wavetable, which is kind of like a clone of Serum in terms of like the interface itself. But this does apply to any synth. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of go over the basic parameters of a synthesizer and hopefully break it down to where you understand how to use it and make it not so daunting. So let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, so I'm here inside of Ableton 11 and I have Serum pulled up here, as well as a frequency spectrum. And I also have an oscilloscope, so we can kind of look at the different just a couple different things that will be happening inside of Serum here. So the first thing I want to talk about is the oscillator section. And so the oscillator section you'll find on pretty much every single synthesizer. This is basically where the input signal comes from. And so I'm here on this basic shapes choice because this is pretty much all of the basic shapes, like a sine wave, triangle, etc., etc., etc. If you ever took a physics class, you probably learned about some of these shapes in there. And so, for example, here is a sine wave, and if I go and I play the sine wave, you can see that is making this shape here, which it kind of demonstrates here as well inside of Serum. Like if I go lower, you can see that they're spread out more, but as I go higher, there's more cycles is what they're called that will happen. So as you see, as I go higher, the volume raises as well and gets louder the higher up it goes. So essentially there's three different parameters that can be manipulated within a synth, as we just kind of saw. So there's frequency, which as we saw here was just the different pitches essentially. So you can change pitch. You can also change the volume, which is this down here. This little envelope can go and manipulate the volume. But also, as we saw, the volume got louder and quieter based on like how high or low we went in pitch. And then there's also the timbre, which is right here, the different waveforms. And so by manipulating and changing it, you can get additional overtones or harmonics that are added. So for example, I'll use a square wave because that one has a lot of harmonics. So if I play it here on the frequency spectrum analyzer, as you can see, there's this main note here that is the loudest, but there's also all this other information here that's above. And so that's what's called harmonics. So there's this main frequency, which is called the fundamental frequency. And then there's these harmonics or these overtones that are happening as well. And so that is essentially timbre when it comes to something else that can be manipulated as well. You can go and take harmonics and add harmonics to any frequency that you're using within a synth. All right, so now that we understand what can be manipulated within a synth, let's go ahead and talk again about the waveforms. This here, basic shapes, I feel is definitely the most crucial to learn. These are kind of like your building blocks, your kind of like your main ingredients here to start a dish. This is basically just like the main thing that you want to learn. And so these different shapes here, they all can make a huge variety of different sounds and is a great starting point to learning synthesis. So first up here is the sine wave, and this is mainly used for making stuff like sub bass, 808s. It has a really smooth tone to it, as you can hear here. it's very round like this. So if you want to make like a round sound, like a round bass or some nice soft chords or like a soft pad sound, like you would probably use a sine wave. And at the same time, you can go high up, and you can play around with things like the pitch and some other things, and you can make like lasery sounds too, like when you go pretty high up. So it's definitely good for a huge variety of sounds. It's one of my favorite waveforms to use when it comes to synthesis, just because it can do so much with it. So the next waveform is the saw wave. It's also known as a sawtooth, and so it comes from, if you look, as you can see, it looks like teeth at the top there. There, I can get a better view. So yeah, the sawtooth or the saw waveform, this is used mainly for like a Reese bass. It's also used for like saw chords, which is what it's used for a lot. And so this has a bit more of like a gritty, kind of crunchy texture to it, whereas like this sine wave is much more smooth. So this one is great for those more like crunchy sounds, and just has a lot more harmonic content. And so it's great for stuff like that. So, and then there's the triangle wave. And so as we see here, there's these different triangles happening, but also on the oscilloscope, we can once again see that it's making triangles. And so this is kind of like a bit more of a harsher sine wave. It's almost like you went and took the sawtooth and the sine wave and kind of mixed them together to get this triangle wave. But this is, again, can be used for a lot of smoother sounds, but it has a bit more harshness to it. So if you want a bit more harmonic content, when say like you're making a sub, you can use like a triangle waveform, and you'll get a bit more of like that mid-range. So as we can see here, if I go back to these frequency spectrum analyzer, here's all this extra harmonic content, where if I go to a sub, it's just this one, and that's it. There's no extra harmonic content. All right, next is the square wave, and this is probably the loudest one of them all, and also has the most harmonic content. And so this one is also good for a large variety of sounds too. It's very punchy, in your face, as we see here. Literally is a square, so it's very buzzy, good for a lot of sounds as well. If you want just more like in-your-face sounds, I would use the square wave for sure. And if we go back over here, tons of just like harmonic content. I mean, you can't, like, this is the fundamental frequency right here because it's the loudest one, but there's just like such a large variety of additional frequencies that are happening too. Even if I go higher, there's the fundamental frequency, but then there's just so much here too. And so, yeah. And then the next one, this is, I believe, a pulse wave. And so it's kind of like a square wave, but it just has a bit of a different texture to it. It still also has a lot of harmonic content, but as you can see, it kind of has these like additional like peaks and valleys on top. These last two, these are basically just mixtures of previous waveforms. I believe that this is just another type of, so yeah, this is another pulse wave. I believe it's a mixture of a saw wave and a square wave, just kind of like this one. And this last one sounds like it was a mixture of a square wave and a triangle wave. As you can hear that. You kind of hear it there too, but also you get the buzziness of the square wave in there as well. So yeah, these last three here are basically just mixtures of these first four, but the first four, sine wave, saw tooth, triangle, and square, are the most common ones that are great, just kind of like starting points for everything. All right, starting back with the sine wave, we're going to move on to the next section, which is the envelope section. And so this envelope here, by default, affects the volume of the oscillator. And so if I were to go, and as you see I'm playing it, it's just staying static. There's no change in volume or anything like that. As I'm holding down the note, once I let go, it stops. But if I were to go and say, for example, turn the attack up, well, now the volume of the oscillator will come in slowly versus before it just comes in right away. If I change that, have it gradually come in, and same thing with this. This is the release. So if I hold this down and then let go, this is how quickly after I let go of the note that the tail will fall off. So if I hit it, I'm just going to hit it really quickly. As you can see, it falls off slowly over time, whereas if I go and drop the release back down, it just cuts off really quickly when I go and just tap the note like that. And then the sustain and the decay, I go and I drop the sustain down. This is a better way of kind of explaining the decay. So over time, this volume is going to drop down. And so I can go and have it, you know, drop very quickly with a short decay. You get more kind of like a plucky, stabby sound if I do that. But if I draw it out like this, then it kind of fades out over time because the decay is happening at a slower speed. And then with this, you know, with the sustain all the way up, it will just stay at a static volume. But as I go and I turn it down, as you can see, the volume is dropping down. All these different parameters. This is basically ADSR, attacks, decay, sustain, release. These are also 4 things that are super crucial to learn, because this is how you go and manipulate the shape of these waveforms up here. So same thing, you know, if I went to a sawtooth, you have this more kind of like plucky sound because of that. If I do that, more sustained, and then with this, it comes in over time. All right, so next I want to talk about the filter section. I know I was in Serum, but now I pulled up Ableton's wavetable, which is essentially the same kind of interface as Serum. So as you can see here, we have the basic shapes, and you can cycle through them like so. And then we have the ADSR section over here, and then here is the filter. And so this automatically defaults to a low-pass filter. And so this is basically just removing frequencies as I go lower. So you can see it will go and play everything from 715 hertz and below. Whereas if I go and change it to a high pass filter, it's going to play everything from 715 hertz and above. So if I were to just play again, I'm on a sine wave. So it's kind of hard to hear. Let me go higher. But as you can see, it's just removing all of like that low end. Whereas if I switch it over to a low pass filter, it's going to get rid of that high end gradually by removing that. Now, as you can see here, it's at around 1,000 kilohertz, which is where the fundamental frequency is. So this is sitting at 156 hertz, so it's removed a majority of that sound. But if I go lower, you hear more, because now we're in the 200 to 300 hertz range, and right now the frequency is playing everything from 268 hertz and below. So it's going to come in a bit louder because I'm going at a lower frequency range, whereas like if I'm higher, it's going to sound much quieter when I'm using a low pass filter. But if I were to use the high pass, much louder, even if I were to go higher. Whereas like if I went lower, you can't hear anything. You don't hear anything until I get to around 500 and 600 hertz right here. And we're, you know, sitting at the 1,000 plus kilohertz range. So yeah, these are both kind of like the main filter sounds. So you can use these to kind of change. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to, I think this is the triangle wave. So same thing. Oh yeah, this is the triangle wave. So I can still get quite a lot with this. But outside of that, there's other types as well. This is a notch filter. And so I can make a notch here. It gets like more resonant, like especially as I go higher up. This is the resonance knob. So as I do that, it's kind of highlighting that frequency. And so as you can see here, it's highlighting this particular frequency, whereas I go and move this, it's going to move around like that. So then there's also the bandpass filter. And so this one is basically just reducing certain frequencies versus accenting and enhancing them. I can move this around. You can kind of hear if I go higher. Very subtle when it comes to the bandpass. But yeah, it's going and just reducing that certain band of frequencies. And this last one, it looks like you can morph between the different ones. They have all the different filters that you can kind of cycle through, and it kind of makes for a lot of movement in the sound. So if you want like more like organic sounds, you can use a filter like this that will just go and kind of move the shape and make it feel like it's moving, it's twisting, it's very organic sounding. And so I can go and just play around with that. I go back to higher. And say I were to go and like modulate this parameter here, I can get some cool, interesting moving sounds happening by using something like this, plus coupling it with like the frequency and moving this around as well. So that's pretty much it filter-wise that the wavetable has. If I go back to Serum, they have quite a lot more options. So you can go into like these different, I mean, here's like the bandpass and notch filters and things like that. And there's also like comb filters and flange filters, phasers, and these all are all filters that kind of have to do more so with like effects and things like that. And these are all really cool filters as well. We can get some cool just like effects and kind of some interesting voicing and things like that. Like ring mod's a really good one. The comb filter, formant filters, scream, band reject. There's all sorts of just interesting ones here in this miscellaneous tab here. So definitely go and explore that if you have Serum. Lots of fun stuff in there. Same with all the different, you know, like waveforms here as well. There's all sorts of very interesting ones. But again, just for now, just learn the basic shapes and also just learn how to kind of use low pass and high pass and notch and band pass filters. And I feel like that's a pretty good intro to both the filter section as well as the oscillator section. So, and then the last thing I want to talk about is modulators. And these are something that can go and manipulate the sound versus, you know, let's just say if I were to go and move this around, well, I don't want to do that all the time. If I have like a modulator, like say an LFO, for example, that I can throw onto one of these knobs, then it does the work for me. I don't have to sit there manually tweaking it, things like that. And so LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. So basically what it does is, for example, I will just drop this here on the volume of this oscillator. And so if I hit a note, as you can see, it's kind of like modulating the volume. If I can do something more drastic, if I turn the level all the way down and I turn this modulator amount all the way up, now you can hear it more drastically. And so you can go and play around with the rate of how quickly this happens. So if I did it over the course of a bar, does it more slower, whereas I go and I speed up to say like eighth notes, then it will happen every eighth note. And so you can go and change it to where it will trigger each time you hit a note. Or if I did the bar, it'll start over, versus if I have it off, it'll just kind of happen whenever. So it totally depends on how you want to go and use this function. There's also envelope, or again, it's kind of the same as trigger. It just happens each time a note is pressed. But yeah, so this can be applied to pretty much anything within Serum. Any knob you can drop it onto, even like up here, these things as well. So you can go and pretty much just manipulate it to your heart's content. And then you can go and change the shape. You can go and use these to like bend it and double click to add extra points and things like that. So you can really get pretty technical with this whole thing. Same thing with over here in the effects. We didn't go over this section, but these are all just different effects that you can kind of apply to the synth itself. But same thing here, you can go and drop this onto anything and just play around with this here. Same with the envelope too. If you want to go and use the envelope, like you like the shape of that and you want to apply it to things as well, you can drag and drop it onto anything. But yeah, these different modulators can really go a long way in terms of morphing the sound and creating just like very interesting morphing timbres and whatnot, and changing the pitch and the volume and things like that. So these are definitely super nice, super handy to just throw on all sorts of stuff. I feel like throwing it on the level of the oscillator as well as this coarse pitch, those are two great kind of starting options. So let me go ahead and just bring this back, get rid of all these points. So I like to throw this, for example, onto this coarse pitch, and then I'll go back to basic shapes. So now I have a sine. As you can see, it's kind of like changing the pitch. So if I bring it back down and just do just like a normal kind of down ramp like this, now I have kind of like an 808. You can play with this, and this will kind of go and change how quickly it goes and modulates across this parameter over time. But as you can see, it's happening at a much more quicker rate. It's kind of like this over here, same type of thing. You're just using this envelope here to go and morph these parameters here. And so I can go and have this happen at a much quicker rate. Oh yeah, one other thing with the trigger, if I go and I put it on like quarter note like this, then it will repeat. Whereas envelope, it just plays it once. But with trigger, it have kind of like more like an oscillating, like a moving type of sound like this. So yeah, something like that would be cool. And if I go up an octave, so yeah, super fun to play with. Just go crazy, drop it on anything and everything within inside here of Serum. You can do the same thing inside of Wavetable as well. It has this this matrix source right here. You can go and play with these and play with the amounts as well as the amp, pitch, oscillator one position, warp, etc., etc. And you can go and add more of these as well. See, if I move a parameter, it will add that in there, and I can go and play around with it. Now, as you can see, it's kind of modulating it. Like so. So yeah, super fun. Definitely suggest diving into that a bit later. But for now, just familiarize yourself with these other sections here, envelope and the different wavetables, and then play around with the filters, just kind of to get a grasp for it. And then as you kind of understand how each one of these works, then you can play around with the LFO modulators, envelope modulators, things like that. All right, so that is kind of a quick crash course on synthesis. Again, like I said, super, super basic, but I feel like learning these different parts of a synth can hugely help you in, you know, being able to make any sound you want, and will take your sound design that much farther. But yeah, if you have anything else that you feel is crucial, please drop a comment down below. As always, if you enjoy our videos, please leave a thumbs up on this video and consider subscribing to Unison's channel. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.